Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Buy Yourself Flowers podcast. Today we're joined by Natasha Devon, a writer, broadcaster, and mental health campaigner whose work focuses on youth mental health, education, and well-being. Exam season can bring so much pressure, anxiety, and self-doubt. So today we'll be talking about exam stress, student mental health, and how young people can look after themselves without feeling like they're falling behind. So we have so much to get into, so let's get started. We saw that you wrote the book, Yes, You Can, A School Without Losing Your Mind. Can you please talk a little bit about its main message and what you want every student to take from it when they read it?
So I wrote that because I do a lot of focus groups in schools with 14 to 18-year-olds. And something that I was hearing all the time from that age group was, well, I know my mental health's important, but I have my GCSEs coming up or I have my A levels coming up. And therefore, all the stuff that I've learned, whether it's in PSHE or whether it's via social media or via my peers about how to look after myself, all of that's being put to one side right now because I'm focused on my academic performance.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, somewhere along the lines, then we must have picked up this idea that it's a choice between looking after your mental health and performing well. And the evidence doesn't support that idea at all. It's not a binary choice because it's all your brain, right? And if you look after your brain and you look after your mental health, it actually improves your ability to perform academically. So the idea behind Yes You Can is it's a really practical book. There's quizzes in it, there's cartoons, there's advice on, what to eat, how much sleep to get, all of that kind of stuff. But it's simple techniques that will help you to get the best grade that you're capable of and also look after your mental health at the same time.
What's the difference between kind of healthy pressure that helps you perform and stress that's actually damaging your mental health? And how do students know which one they're experiencing?
That's a really good question. So there is a point of diminishing returns when it comes to stress. And I always like to think of it as like a stress bucket. So you'll encounter bits of stress all the time. We all do because life is stressful, right? And we're constantly just being thrown these kind of balls of stress expected to catch all the time. But if you imagine that every time that happens, a little bit of stress flows into your stress bucket, what you're trying to avoid is it overflowing. And you'll know when your stress bucket is overflowing because you'll lose the ability to focus. So, when you're reading the same line over
Over and over again.
Yeah,
it's not,
definitely.
yeah, that's the
Yeah.
sign of it. Decision paralysis. So feeling like you don't know what to do and you can't make a decision about anything. Inability to retain information, inability to problem solve. All of these are linked to the stress bucket overflowing, as are things like, oh, I didn't really mean that, saying things that you're not proud of or behaving in ways that, you wish you hadn't, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So the idea is ideally that you wouldn't wait until you got to that stage. And everybody takes an hour a day to empty their stress bucket. And there are three really good ways to do that. There are physical activity, creativity, and relaxation. So you want to be ring fencing an hour a day, every day. And then the theory is that your stress bucket never overflows.
That's so interesting for sure.
Yeah.
I was going to ask because I know I've experienced this, but whenever it comes to exam periods, I feel quite disassociated from my true, like, authentic self when I'm not in exam period. And do you think that kind of disassociation is caused by an overflowing of stress, or do you think do you think that also the environment and everyone talking about exams all the time has a really big impact on your mental health in the moment as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of reasons why you could feel that way. It could be that your brain has gone into fight or flight, and that's when your brain shuts down your conscious mind, so you don't dither. It puts you into survival mode. You have an amygdala hijack, what's called an amygdala hijack, and it means that you will do whatever is most advantageous for your survival in that moment, according to your brain, which doesn't necessarily know what's going on and doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily understand the
Yeah.
nuances of what's going on. So it could be that, or it could be that it's another kind of survival technique where you're going, this is who I need to be to get through this time. You're kind of
Yeah.
putting your head down and knuckling through it. And I would say both of those things are absolutely normal. You know, it's your brain trying to protect you during a time of elevated stress. But again, not necessarily the second one, but certainly the first one does impact your academic performance negatively. So in the book, there are techniques that you can use. So if, for example, you're walking into an exam going, I want to run away, or you know that you're not reading the question properly, or
Yeah.
you go blank and you forget everything that you've revised. These are all signs of an amygdala hijack. So there are things that you can practice in the run up to the exam that you can then do for the first couple of minutes in the exam that will take you out of that state.
Mm.
And those couple of minutes, let's say you take 5 minutes a day to practice those techniques, that counts towards your stress bucket emptying. So it's a really good example of something that kind of serves both.
Yeah. Very interesting. Thank you.
What are the signs that stress is becoming something more serious, such as like anxiety or depression? And what should a student do if they feel that in themselves or in a friend?
So there are three things to look out for that would indicate that what you're experiencing is perhaps becoming a mental health issue as opposed to the anxiety that we all feel, the kind of day-to-day anxiety. The first is context. So most people get anxious about exams. It's a completely exams are weird, right? Just think about it. You have
Yeah.
all of your personal possessions taken away from you, and you're told to go into a room and sit at a tiny desk and write down everything you know under timed conditions. And then you're told that your whole future depends on it. That's a weird situation to be in. So it's little wonder that you would feel anxious about that. That doesn't necessarily indicate that it's an issue with your mental health. It's a normal response. I would say try and separate out, are you anxious about the exam itself, or are you anxious about what the exam represents in the context of your life? The uncontrollables, you know, so the things like whether you'll get the grade to get into the uni you want to, or the apprenticeship or the job that you want and what that means for your future, et cetera, et cetera. It's very easy for exam anxiety to snowball because there are so many other things attached to it. But if you feel anxious all the time, regardless of context, then that is one of the things that suggests a mental health issue. The second thing is how much is this preventing your ability to function? If it stops you from doing the things that you need to do or want to do or enjoy doing, then that's also an indicator. And the third thing is the length of time that it's gone on for. They normally say if it's gone on for a period of more than 2 weeks, that's when you should talk to someone. Doesn't definitely mean you have an anxiety disorder, but that's probably when you should either book an appointment with your GP, see your school counselor. There's some great charities like the Mix, for example, that have helplines and chat rooms that you can use. Talk to a professional, basically.
There's this saying that schools are becoming more and more like exam factories because of the culture that's being grown and the fact that students are always, in very much of a bubble, always thinking about the next big exam that's coming up in their lives. From your experience visiting schools across the UK, do you think that that's a fair assumption to make about schools? And what does that kind of environment actually do to a young person's like identity?
Yeah, so the exam factory thing comes from the so I've been going into schools now since 2008, a really long time.
Wow,
Yeah, it would have been 18 years in September. Yeah. So pretty much longer than both of you have been alive, I would imagine. Yes. And in 2010, so 2 years after I first started doing these focus groups in schools and delivering these lessons, the Conservatives came into power, and the education secretary was a guy called Michael Gove. And he made huge changes to the education system, one of which was to reduce the amount of coursework and increase the amount of testing. So children started to be tested earlier in their education, more throughout their education, and then more depended on exam performance on the given day of your GCSE or A level, whereas before there was more of a percentage that depended on your coursework. At the same time, the budgets were reduced for PSHE, and also there was a focus on what are called core academic subjects, which meant that things with a proven therapeutic value, so things that we know support mental health, like drama and music and sport and art, started to be kind of squeezed to the margins of the curriculum in a lot of schools. And that's when people started using this phrase exam factories, because it felt like all of the things that make a kind of holistic, rounded education were starting to be removed. And it was all just about like not only get the grade, but also, what's the job going to be at the end of it? That became the focus as opposed to learning for its own sake, if you see
Yeah.
what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we hear a lot about, I guess, this generation, we're becoming more and more anxious and overwhelmed than previous generations. So you've, I mean, been in rooms with these young people and, beyond the statistics and the headlines, what have you kind of noticed that gives you hope for where we're kind of headed and what we're capable of? Because I think we hear a lot about, you know, things are getting progressively worse and, with social media as well. But is there anything that gives you hope?
Oh, loads of stuff. I'm constantly, it's really weird, right? Because I've got one foot in schools. I'm in a couple of schools a week, and then one foot in media because I have my LBC show on a Saturday and I write for some of the newspapers. And the chasm between the way that young people are described in media and then what I see when I'm talking to young people and working with young people in schools is just enormous. I just don't recognize the way that young people are often characterized and described as, as being lazy is a word that's often used and entitled. That's the
Yeah.
other thing. I'm like, where are they getting this from? And the other thing as well is this narrative that all young people are being radicalized and that they love the far right. And I'm like, maybe, 1 in 10 boys in schools quite likes Andrew Tate. And that's a problem, and that's enough to, make a lot of the lives of the girls in that school a misery. And I'm not saying that we should ignore that, but I don't think that that boy is representative of the entire generation. So I feel an enormous amount of hope because what I see is young people who are adapting to a world that's changing really rapidly, almost kind of watching and seeing and going, there's more of a freedom, I think, to not define yourself in the way that my generation, it was like 8 years old, they were going, what do you want to be? And now there's a freedom to go, well, I don't know, because I don't know what jobs there will be at the
Yeah.
end of this process. And an enormous amount of resilience as well. I know that again, the narrative is that young people lack resilience, but that's not what I encounter at all. An enormous amount of emotional literacy. Young people are much better able to talk about their mental health than their parents and their grandparents are, to describe what they're going through. And there is a thirst to be practically helped with it as well, which is what all of my work in schools is about. It's like, okay, we're aware. We've done the awareness. Now let's find out how do we practically look after our brains and live our best lives.
And do you find that your talks have been quite successful touring around the UK? And how did the students kind of respond to what you were saying?
The response is overwhelmingly positive now. I've definitely, because the way that I work is I look at the patterns in the focus groups that I do, and then based on those patterns, I work with neuroscientists and psychologists and other experts, and I come up with lesson plans. So if I'm very clearly seeing that there is a demand to talk about such and such in
Mhm.
such and such a way, I will find the experts that can help me create that lesson plan. And that means that I can be very agile and I can respond quickly to what the needs are. But it also means that there is a potential to get it wrong at first.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like particularly when I first started doing body image with men and boys in mind,
Okay.
I got it completely wrong at first. And you can tell when it's landing and you can tell when people are responding and absorb. And I was going, okay, this is not cutting through. And I had to sort of broaden the research I was doing, and I spoke to Instagram fitness models and personal trainers and sports people, and all these kinds of people to really understand what's the culture here,
Yeah.
where are the dangers and what are the things behind it. So I wouldn't want you to think that everything that I've done has been 100% successful straight away, but I would say because I can be so adaptive, working as an individual as I do, supported by experts, when they're right, they're
Yeah.
really right.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Okay, well, I think that's all the questions that we had for you. Thank you so much for coming on. This was so interesting, and I'm so glad that we could have this conversation.
Yes, thank you
Thank you
so
so much for having me.
much to meet you.